without the mayor being here, I already talked to him about what I'd like to do. And so if you don't mind, I will begin and we'll turn this portion over to you
Sure,
as soon as I get
sure.
making some opening comments.
Sure.
As you know, last Thursday, March 28th, we had a budget meeting and it ended with an unbalanced budget. We had expenses of $1,506,951, property taxes $722,310, other revenue $739,723, with a negative balance of $44,918. We agreed at the end of the meeting that we would go home and spend some time over the weekend and try to work on some of these numbers to come up with a balanced budget tonight. And over the weekend, Dan Keating and I spent a lot of time individually working on these numbers. Dan wants to make a presentation on the work that he did. But for now, we all received a budget that Mary put together as of March 28th, which showed the negative balance, 44,000. So that's where we left off at the last meeting. Now, on Sunday, we all received an email from Trustee Keating with his work, and we'll address his work because he's prepared to do a presentation, so we'll address that later. But then on Monday, I sent my budget works to everyone, and what I did with the budget was I took a very aggressive axe to some of the numbers, and I wound up with expenses at $1,449,001. Property taxes were the same, $722,310 and $739,723, which ended with a positive number of $13,032. And I sent that to everyone, and you all had a copy of that. I sent that to everyone on Monday. On Monday, Mary, our treasurer, also worked the numbers, and she sent her calculated and revised budget to everyone also.
Yes.
And she listed expenses at $1,480,776, and property taxes of $730,000, other revenue of $750,444. As you'll note,
Hi, Dan.
there was an increase, well, there, how about you grab it? So as you know, there was an increase in the property taxes and an increase in other revenue. And that reflects a tax increase of 4% from $3.79 per thousand to $3.95 per thousand. To put that in its proper perspective, I contacted the New York State Controller's Office and found out that of the 493 villages in New York State, the average tax rate per thousand is $6.74. The median is $5.69 per thousand. So even with the tax increase, we are below the average and the median for the state.
Could I make a point here, Frank?
Yes.
I know, Dan, when you look at the last few years, you see the tax increases that we've had. But the reason those tax increases were necessary is because for several decades, the village underfunded itself. And that underfunding has taken away the village's ability to do capital projects, to fund equipment, and you've been witnessing the effects of that. So I think, the flaw in the village's budget process, and Mary can validate this, because Mary has been part of this for this time, is that the village, for many years, typically tried to undercut the inflation rate, which actually reduced revenue. At the same time, the aid that the village received, primarily from New York State, most of it has gone away. CHIPS has been frozen in time, which means in real dollars, the amount of aid we received has been significantly reduced, and the same thing has happened with AIM. So, I think we have to be cognizant that if we're going to run a village with an adequate level of services, we have to adequately fund the revenue for it.
And having said that, so we had, as of Monday, we had my balanced budget with a surplus of 13,000, and Mary's balanced budget balanced completely with a tax increase.
And yours had no tax increase.
I had no tax increase. Trustee Keating, because it was April 1st, sent an email to Mary saying you must be joking about her budget.
Well, she signed off the last email. Hey, I balanced the budget. Happy April Fool's Day. It was an easy thing to
Yes.
ask whether she was joking.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what we have thus far. Now, as I said earlier, Trustee Keating would like to show us the work that he did over the weekend. We both worked extensively by going over these numbers. Now, I understand we got new numbers. The numbers that I worked with were the ones that you sent.
Right.
And we have new numbers as of this afternoon?
Yeah.
Right, those are the ones
so
that are attached.
Essentially what I did was I took Mary's budget and just put it in the same format. So I'll walk you through it.
Which pages are those, Dan? Is that this?
This is, yes, it's a
Okay.
packet.
Yeah, so
Right, it's a
you,
packet.
you want the header, oh,
Yes.
the header's part of this? Okay.
Now,
Um,
before we start,
Yeah,
Dan, do you mind? Because I went through your work and you probably went through mine,
Yeah.
and there are comments that can be made about your various categories and the various moves that
Right.
you are reflecting. And I hope you don't mind if we make a comment on your
Absolutely.
various line items.
that's right. And,
Okay?
and the whole idea, the whole point is that we could change, so, a certain column has a formula of taking what our projected is versus our budgeted. And we could change that. We could put in, well, I don't want it to be our projected, I want it to be last year's budget versus this year's budget. Those kinds of things. We can just do that on the fly
Okay,
if we want. What I want from, can I ask you a question?
yes.
What, to summarize, what were the things that you cut the most? And then I'll want to talk to you and see which of the Frank's cuts made it in you. I want to know the difference between what you cut and what you cut. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Well, we have to go through them line item by line item, and I don't have one of these.
Right, yeah,
But let me add one more comment.
sure.
Mary's work and my work were based on our historical knowledge of the expenses,
Mm-hmm.
and were based on our current knowledge of what we've experienced this year, and what we know of going through the budget numbers that we've gone through at our meetings. And that was the basis for our numbers. And I noted that your work, you worked with a mathematical
Yeah.
formula. So what you did was you took the numbers through February,
Right.
and that was 100, that was one.
Right.
And then you took .33,
Oh, that's right.
which was the rest of the year.
So
So
it's,
you,
it's a guess of what we'll spend this year.
right, so you took the number
Right.
at the end of the month, February 28th, and multiplied that by 1.33,
Right,
and that was your projected full year number.
yes. And that may or may not be right.
And,
There may be some places where we haven't paid bills that we're expecting to come in and, you know, that kind of thing. So it's just something to look at.
right. Okay,
I don't pretend that's gospel.
all right, so at this point, we'll turn it over to
Okay,
you, Dan.
Let me walk you through the model and just, Frank, you've already, so essentially what I did is I took everything in the, I just took the summary. Okay, so, you know, for example, in the village board, I just took total village board, right? I didn't take every single account. I just did the subtotals of each
right.
account. The other thing that I did is I pulled apart salaries and expenses. I wanted to treat those two things differently, mostly because we haven't allocated the salaries to each of the various funds yet, so you don't get a really truly accurate
Only
picture
on-
unless you look at them separately.
Only on the DPW.
Only on the DPW, yep. All right, so what you're looking at is just expenses. This has no salary data in it whatsoever, and as Frank's already walked through the first two columns, so this is what we spent through February 28th, which is the 9th month of the fiscal year. There are 3 more months left, so a quarter of the year. So then this just takes a guess and says, our projection for the year will be 1.33 what we've spent already. We've then got the 18-19 budget, and this is the proposed budget. Now, over under, this calculates, and I'll highlight it, this takes what we've proposed versus what I think we'll spend. You might argue that a better way to do that would be what's proposed versus the 18-19 budget, I don't know. But this was just meant to show where are we spending less, where are we budgeting less than we spent, and where are we budgeting more than what we spent.
So this is where your formula shows an increase in the projected year end, where
Right.
where the projected year end, based on what Mary's done, is $600. So you're showing that it's over, but it's really based on your formula.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very possible that this is the total amount that we'll spend for the whole year. I don't know, but this is a pretty. It's probably close, more or less, when you look at the total at the bottom, 885. So then this shows, this is an important cell. So this is essentially saying we expect to spend 21% less in fiscal year 1920 than we're going to spend in fiscal year 1819. So the greens are we're going to spend less than we thought, and the reds are we're going to spend more than we thought.
Based on your formula.
Yes.
Okay.
Now I could base it on anything. I could just go budget to budget and do it that way if you want. And we could do that as a new column. And essentially I've colored anything over 10% got a red, anything minus 10% or more got a green.
Okay.
Because I'm not all too concerned with a 0.6% change. It's not really materially significant. So I did that mainly to see if anything jumped out at us. So we expect to spend 100% more. Like that now, like if you sort it, we could easily sort it from highest to lowest. You know, that makes perfect sense. We're going to spend $500 in a year, and we didn't spend anything this year. So
But are we gonna
Not
spend
yet.
anything
Not
next
yet.
year?
That's
Because
the
there's no
thing.
election.
Now, let's go back up to the engineer column.
okay,
Okay. Based on your formula, which does not take into account historical
true.
and planned events.
Right.
For example, we've got plugs in for the proposed budget, 5,000, which you say is over based on your formula. Now, we just walked Shane Place
Right.
with the engineer.
Right.
And we're working on a few other things with the
Yeah.
engineer.
Yeah.
That 5,000 is probably a real number, and it could be a little short,
Sure.
because we're using him, so that's where the formula falls
Sure.
short.
And this is just meant, and it's just meant to have that kind of conversation.
Okay,
Hey, we're good. It doesn't actually change anything. It just says, hey, let's look at the ones with big numbers and see if they're true or not.
now the same thing with elections.
Right.
Mary plugged that number in because Mary knows, I know,
Yeah.
we didn't have an election
Right.
one year, but we have an election coming up next year.
Right.
That's where
Sure.
that $500 is.
And that's only 500, so that's not
But
a big
we
number.
don't have an election next year.
Yeah,
Uh,
but what if somebody decides to drop out and you have to have a
Oh,
special
gotcha,
election?
gotcha.
You have to have 4 electors, and that's, election inspectors, and that's what that money
Got
is
it,
for.
got it.
So here's a real place to hone it, and actually let me show you a couple other things really quickly, just in the model itself. So the point one accounts, this is all of the salary info, okay? So this is just showing, it's the same exact thing, it's just showing it for salary. Now, in this case, because of all the DPW, it's all in one account.
Mhm.
So it's not exactly easy to see, but you can see a 30% increase on the clerk expenditures over what we're going to pay, and that just jumps out, and it's worth having a conversation about.
But that's not taking into consideration that Dorothea has been gone for 3 months, and her wages are not reflected in there because there were no wages, they were being
Mhm.
paid by,
Sure.
workman's comp.
Yep.
So that,
So the
That's
projected will actually go
so
down.
what I
Yeah.
need to do when I'm budgeting it, I have to do her full salary and the salary of the other clerks in the office
Yeah,
that fall into that category. So
Yeah.
that's where that
Sure.
number is.
but that's why you just highlight it and talk about it.
So, plus, we have been talking about the operation of the clerk's office.
Right.
And we've been talking about doing an overview and doing job descriptions to determine whether we need that deputy clerk position, which I'm kind of thinking we need that extra person, but we don't need a deputy clerk. We need somebody who could do a lot of the clerical work at a lesser cost.
Right.
So with regards to the clerk's office, we all agreed, and I think you did, that we're gonna take an overview and look at it and
But-
do a
But I
determination.
think we have to be conservative in making presumptions until we finish that process. I agree with you, Frank, that we need to do a thorough review of the tasks that are needed for the current office requirements. But it would be irresponsible to not provide enough funding so that we're not hamstrung once we conclude that analysis.
Correct.
So I want to walk you through one other part of this. So this is here. This is the same kind of thing, and then these zeros are distracting. All this is showing is what changed from the last budget to this budget. So this is saying, okay, nothing changed on the village board amount. It went down by 650 from the 28 was the last one, 331. And then another one on 4.2 that we got. So it's
Oh, the
your
budget.
last two versions. So this is just showing you where the changes happened. So we increased law by 500, decreased garage and DPW by 4,000, decreased street maintenance by 3,000. So this is just showing you what changed. If you want to approach it from that way and really take a look at what changed, we could do it that way if you want. This went up. Street engineering went up by 4,000. Planning went down by 10.5. Those are the kinds of things we'll want to talk about tonight. Just
Well,
kind of hone in on.
yeah, and let me add that I've asked our DPW superintendent to be here. So if there are any questions related to the DPW, Zach is here, and Zach went over his numbers with Mary before they reached
Okay.
the final document. Okay.
So let me just go back here because there were definitely a couple things that I wanted to talk about. Let me get rid of this for a minute. Let me just delete that. Okay, so what I wanna do really quickly is sort these. So, hold on. Sorry, where is it? Filter. Okay, so I wanna go from our highest, let's actually go lowest to highest. Okay, so these are the biggest amounts that have changed. Okay, and I just kind of want to talk about the big ones first. So, benefits, I assume that's just a formula, Mary, right? Based
No,
on our
it's-
head count?
No, not really.
So our benefits we show
What I
have
did,
gone, and just to be clear what we're talking about, benefits have gone down we're budgeting $12,539 less than we expect to come in this year. So that's what that means.
okay, and the reason behind that is I looked at the retirement number, which still is not, we still don't have one plugged out there, so I don't know what that real number will be. So based on what we had last year for an invoice, which was 58,000, I believe I had 58,000 sitting in that line to begin with, from probably the budget before. In looking at it, I felt I've already accounted for that. It would probably be a better number to have as something more in line with what we already have had historically speaking. The only clincher in all of that will be that we could, in the end, end up having to pay a larger invoice because now we've had a little shift in personnel.
Yeah.
So that might make a little bit of a difference, but I won't know that for a little ways out. So that
But
was,
what you have plugged in there is what you think it will be.
it's a gamble at this point until I know. And I might not know for a couple of weeks out until they, put the budget and stuff up.
It's just intuitively, I looked at that and I said, our benefits are going down in cost by almost 7%.
It's only because of the retirement. That was the only number that I tweaked in there.
Okay. If you're comfortable, is everybody comfortable with that? Okay.
I know the state has been trying to decrease the amount they've been taking. I know they took a different projection last couple of years.
So this is the other one, is the legal fees. So the projection, so we're currently at about 192. And if you do that times the 1.33, you're gonna come in at 255. And we are budgeting 246. Does that feel right to you guys?
Well, that was a number that you and I went through,
Yeah.
and I took the legal fees from 2005 to 2012, you recall, and we took the average there. And then we noted all of the changes in legal fees to come up with that number. And at that point, you thought that was a good number.
Yeah, I feel better about 246 than I did about 211, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the other thing too is, the numbers that I have in here for law are the ones that were provided to us by the attorneys.
Right. But that,
And
yeah.
the only other difference that I had in there was because we're negotiating with the union this year, I just upped that number by 500, and that could be, we may not need it in that category, it might be able to be put somewhere else, but I thought maybe we might need a little bit more in there.
Okay.
So the legal fee number was also affected by the projections that we received by
The
the
attorneys.
attorney.
Yeah. So it's a, as a percentage of the budget, it's a big part, so just wanted to revisit it.
Okay.
The sweeper lease, I would have thought this was pretty steady. Why did
It's
we?
a non-negotiable item, that is what our principal and our interest is.
Last year we
As-
didn't pay interest.
Right, we have to pay interest on it every year. So that is what's been given to us to expect for a payment.
So is this 23,747 paid to date on that? Is that all we'll pay for the year, or will there be more
No,
payment?
that is it for this fiscal year.
Okay.
Starting in June, we will have another payment, and so again, I'm covering the principal and interest for next
Right.
year.
So Frank, this is a case where the 1.33 formula doesn't
It
hold.
doesn't work.
Yeah,
Right.
so you just plug it in like that, and now we see a modest increase.
And I've got the contract from the M&T Bank,
Mhm.
and that's the monthly payment, 23,747.42.
Yep.
The interest changes every year,
Yeah.
but the monthly payment stays
Okay.
the same.
All right, now some of these greens, these are really interesting to talk about because you think, oh, we're saving money, that's great. The concern is, did we budget enough?
Under safety inspection, you have an increase of 62% is because we do have a full-time building inspector now
Right.
where we had a part-time one and none for a good portion of this past fiscal year. So we're starting out,
So that's a decrease, because remember, this is just cost, this is
Yeah.
not salary. So, this is showing that we will
is
spend,
T.Y. Lin maybe in there?
we will spend 3,700 less than we did last year,
That might-
probably.
That
Yeah.
might be T.Y. Lin.
That could be
And
T.Y.
we used
Lin.
T.Y. Lin quite extensively this year with,
Yeah,
We had to because we had no building inspector.
Mhm.
yeah, that was contracted.
And right
T.Y.
now-
Lin was in there, and that was actually one that I cut because we have a building inspector now, so.
Yep.
I cut that one.
That was a good cut.
But then
Um,
it shows up in the building inspector's line as part of his salary, really.
Well,
Well,
No?
it's a vendor cost.
It ends up being a contractor. It's
It's a
got to be
contract
treated different.
Okay, so now we're getting into, $2,000 more in street engineering and 1,200 more in, or 1,200 less in,
in-
these aren't materially significant.
Proposed budget for the street engineering for 4,000. It's
When
because
we-
when I went through the initial budget, I didn't have any money in that line at all. We need money in there for pothole repair, that kind of
yeah.
thing. We're not having a regular street project coming out of that line, but the guys do need to have, street repair money for,
So my question here is 4 enough? When you had, we've already spent 4,700 this year. So we're projecting to spend 6,300 this year. Last year we budgeted 5, this year we're budgeting 4. Is that enough?
I'm gonna say as a general comment to the entire budget, none of these categories have enough money in them. None of them. We're trying to make the best, stretch the money out as far as we can. If I have to transfer in the end, I'll have to transfer, but,
We got a comment from Zach.
I just wanted to say, I'm not sure if the street engineering for South Street would be included in this, or if that's gonna be a separate.
that will be a separate
That'll
project.
be
There'll be a
separate.
capital project in itself, so there's no capital projects reflected in this budget.
In the street lighting category, where did I see street lighting? No, I guess it's street engineering, all right.
No, there is a street lighting. Yeah, so street lighting, so we haven't gotten to the increases yet. So the increases, so this is, hold on, let me freeze this. Freeze beans, okay. So, street lighting here is, go right there. So the budget for this year is proposed at 52.5. This year, we're expected to spend 43, so it's an increase of $9,200, which feels pretty aggressive.
Well, except that RG&E has contacted Zach and wants us to replace the HARP lights. So we haven't met with RG&E yet, so we don't know what exactly is being proposed, but I think we do need some money in there to handle whatever it is.
Now, this number is as of February 28th, where we are lighting streets longer than we are in June.
This is regular street lighting, what it costs the village just to light the streets.
Yeah, so
So-
why would that go up by 10K in a year?
Well,
Well, I don't know where you're getting protected.
Well, so,
Because I'm looking at the budget that I have here, so I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get into the same place you are. My year-end figure was 48,898.95.
okay,
From-
so you wanna say it's gonna be 48,898?
No, that's what we ended up 17, 18 with.
Okay.
We are at 31,600 right now with 3 more months to be booked against this. So we're gonna come
What's
out
the
to
account
something pretty
number on
close to that.
Okay, so, but the question is, so we're gonna come out close to, what do you think our year-end number will be?
It'll be close to 50,000.
It'll be close to 50,000, so,
And that's what I've got booked for the proposed budget is 50,000.
Just on South Main Street.
you have, I had 52.5.
52.5 includes street light
Yes.
repairs of
Yeah.
2,500.
But it's still.
That's for light bulbs, those globes, whatever, it's $2,500.
Usually,
That's not including any kind of poles or anything that might have gone down, which is what we had booked this past year.
What happens if we have to do something different with it? Or if
well, we may, they're gonna try to do the cheapest thing possible, and we're gonna wanna keep the appearance of the park light, so we're probably gonna have to pay some premium to update the electrical service that serves that. So it's probably gonna cost us money, either through engineering or
Yeah,
through,
it's still under the
repair costs.
This number
This
here.
It will be this next year, or?
I assume they're
Should
talking
be.
to us now, so I think we probably should have
Right.
something in the budget to cover it.
I wanna say there were 35 light
We did.
fixtures
You
at
want-
the top.
Yeah.
Um,
And Monroe Avenue and South Main Street.
So Mary,
Also, just to, another side note, is we did have streetlights that were out for a significant amount of time, so we're
4
getting
months.
no lights.
4 months, right?
Yeah.
So we'll
There
get
was
one
a
past
whole
this-
street was-
Pass this paper.
so 32,519.32
Hi.
is what we've spent through the year. And so, and we expect to jump from 32 up to 53 for the whole year.
For a year end, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so you think that's gonna come in right around 53? So that's another place the
Another
1.3.
50,000, right, yep.
That's the one, Frank, that's another place the 1.33 doesn't hold. So this is the big one that I wanted to talk about, and it is
Special items.
special items jumped. So we've spent 5,600 in special items, and we're budgeting for 22.4.
Let me
So
just
let's
see what,
dig into that.
What is that one?
What's
That's-
covered under that, Mary?
Is that the
nope. That's because in this, right, that is
Can
covering
you give me an account number on that?
1920.4, page 3 of the budget.
You?
1920.4 is municipal dues, 1,800, that's gonna be the same for next year, I already have those invoices. Property taxes, I've got 650, last year was 456, this year 328, I'm not sure I have everything booked, because there's, March hasn't hit in there, so I got 650. The big impact item on here is $20,000 that I have sitting in a contingency fund that has 0 in the other ones, because we did have contingency money in those funds, in this line, in the, both of the years past, and they were reallocated out of those lines to other categories that needed the money, like
Okay.
attorneys or whatever. We're starting off the budget brand new. We're allocating, funds that are not identified. We might not know about any of these expenses going forward, so at least we have some cushion for unforeseen items. So that's the big impact
Okay,
item
so
there.
it's a contingency fund.
It's a
Thank you.
contingency
All
fund,
right,
which, by the
so-
way, is actually kind of on the low side.
My question then is, so it's 20,000?
I have 20,000. Last year, we had 26,278 in there. So it's even lower than last year's number.
Okay, so our contingency amount is, percent, is 2.2%. Or do you guys feel like that's a 2% of expenses, not salary, 2% of amount? Do you feel like that's the right amount for a contingency, or should we have more or less, or should we have no contingency?
We can't go without contingency. It probably should be more, but the problem is, for all the expenses that we don't have revenues to match. We need to,
The comptroller's office recommends 15 to 20% of the budget should be a contingency. We haven't come close to matching that, So every time we cut these categories down, we're putting ourselves
Yeah,
at risk of going over.
So I think that's the best we can do.
okay, so everybody's comfortable with that then?
Yeah.
And I assume the bond, there's nothing we can do about that?
Absolutely not, that's a,
Dorothea, you want to address the issue?
This
about
again
what-
is a set number. The only thing that varies is the interest payment, which
Yeah.
should reduce as the bond is paid off. So we get those numbers and that's it. It's just what we have to budget for.
and the number that I have in there is what is on the schedule for repayment for next year.
And there's another example where your formula
Sure.
falls short.
Snow removal, this one jumped out strangely
Which
at
one?
me, snow removal. So if you take
I can address that.
but if you take the salary out of it, we only spent $1,000 and we're budgeting.
All right, the $1,000.
We buy our salt from the town. The town bills us when they want to bill us. So 9,000 is probably a realistic number.
Yeah, we end up using about 187 tons of salt throughout the year, so.
That's about right, that's
Yeah,
about
once
right.
we get that.
Yeah,
So we
the-
just
and-
haven't hit yet.
Yeah.
We just
It
haven't
hasn't
been billed
hit.
for it.
Yes, we should probably see that bill come through in April. The other part of this problem, what you're seeing up there, is what the numbers are for calcium that we use around for some sidewalks. It's not for the actual road salt. Last year, the town did not bill us for our salt from the season. So that is, normally would be in there, it's not in there. We may get hit double with that for this year. I don't know.
Okay.
So-
And then the shade trees. So we've spent 8,200 this year. 1.33 makes it 11K, and we're budgeting 18 for next year, which is a pretty big jump.
Yeah, there's gonna
I-
be some large trees that are gonna be cut down.
That's necessary. We've underfunded trees for like the last 3 years. And we're starting to dig a hole in our street tree forest. And so not only do we have about, 6 major trees that need to be cut down, and that's several $1,000s a piece for some of those trees. We also have to start filling the holes that we've created through lack of funding of that category.
All right, so,
And that number is broken down into 2 categories. One for tree service, 14,000, right, Mary?
that is correct.
And the 4,000 is
It's
for
for tree purchase.
tree purchase. So the majority of that is to take down those trees and to work on those
Page 9,
trees
top of the
that
page.
really need it. And we're talking about the tree man here. He knows what he's talking about.
Oh, sure, I know. It's just,
The
it-
trees
it's
that
just
are-
tricky because you can justify any line item, right? But there's some you gotta cut. I'm not saying this is the one
Well,
that has to be cut, it's just, you make a good argument for any increase. But
Sure.
you're gonna have to cut somewhere.
Mhm.
And there's an 11% increase on costs at the garage and DPW. But I would guess
Wait a minute.
these aren't quite accurate. So we budgeted 45.7 last year, we're budgeting 45 this year. Do you expect to come in at the 45.7 this year?
Wait a minute, what are you taking into account with that?
Same formula as all the others.
No, I mean, where are you picking up 29?
It's essentially, here, give me an account number on that.
One of the DPWs is 5132.1 and
Yeah.
11,
51.
point
Okay.
fours on page 5
Yeah.
under garage and DPW.
Yeah, so it is everything in 5132 except 5132.1
And 11?
and 11. Yep.
Okay.
So it's the
Well, they
35
got
plus
zeros in there right
9.
now. So I've got 34 plus 6 plus 5,500. The modified budget from this year is 4,500 and 4,500. So that is just contractual costs of telephone, internet, the guys running to Debbie's Supply, Granger, conferences. There's a lot of stuff that goes into 5132.4. Aside from that, it's diesel fuel for 6,000 and 5,500 for gasoline for running of the trucks. And that is not a huge change from year prior.
Okay, so just to be clear, that's 63,877.65, which is the total on 5132, right?
Yeah, but that's,
Then
but-
subtracted dot 1 and dot 11.
okay, so you're
So
taking
that's where this 29, almost
okay,
30 comes from, and that's how I got to 39 for the rest of the year.
okay.
So what do you think the number will be for the full year for the garage and DPW?
We're gonna use all that. I'm already, if you look on the detail, on 228, run, I had a $4,500, budgeted on that line. I'm already at $5,600, so I'm already overspent in that line.
On the
So-
diesel fuel, yeah.
On the diesel fuel. I'm trying to compensate for a little bit of that by putting the budget up to 6,000. All right? Gasoline is at 28.94 against the 4,500. We will use all of
Yeah,
that.
I would
There's-
think we would too.
I've
What-
got 5,500 in there, but I'm thinking, gas prices or whatever, they might go up.
How about the
And now
contractual?
with spring
The
coming in,
contractual
hopefully,
34,000?
we're spending through-
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, with spring coming now, we're gonna be spending more money on getting everything ready for summer too, so
Yeah.
there's gonna be some more spending.
So the contractual is
This-
at 21 through
Right
Feb.
now, right, but
Yeah.
we will probably close out pretty close to 34.
Okay.
Because that's all kinds of things that go into there. Like I just listed, tools also is another thing, rakes, they need that. Last year at the year end, we ended up with almost 39,000 spent.
Yeah.
So I'm going down by 5,000 nearly on that category. If we're being a little bit conservative. I mean, it's not a category where we can really take out a lot.
How about architectural board going from 0 spend to 5,100?
In all likelihood, they're going to have a major project come before them again this year, and so we wanted to have money for
Sure.
a
Makes sense.
consultation.
And the
Well,
planning
wait,
board-
the
Go
part of that is
The
salaries.
consultant, the new consultant, Maria,
We
you,
have to have a consultant, we've got 2,000 and, we've got 2,600 in for just the board. And a 500 for some conferences, education of 2,000.
Which is required.
Planning board jumps by about 5K.
5K planning.
That was based on a request from that board that they wanted to have money for both training and consultants.
Planning board, well, I'll tell you,
And in some cases, it was consultants not just for a project, but for exploration of their understanding of a specific issue.
planning board, you're taking the whole category of 80/20.45? What's the number there?
What's the account number on planning?
27,015. That's including comp plan, which isn't fully spent.
Yeah, right.
Which isn't fully spent, right, so this number in itself, as of today, we know is gonna jump an additional $46,000 for the bill that I just sent to you in the email last week. All right, and for continued work, there's another 25,000 in there, which, I think is not considered enough, we're
Okay.
supposed to be getting quotes to try to fund that. 10,000 for just normal consultants, for which we have to, fund ourselves. And 3,400 for the GIS, which this year we pay 3,200 for. That's per contract with the town.
And I assume these sidewalks and curbs will
Okay.
get spent, there's 5K in there.
Hold on a second, that's gonna be spent this spring.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I actually really need more money into that category, but, there's none to be had at this point.
All right, then, so now my next question is for both of you. So this is Mary, what we're essentially looking at here is Mary's work. So I'm interested in what's different between what you proposed and what Mary came back with.
I took a combination of everybody's work in here.
Yeah.
When I was doing this, it's not just all yours or all
Right.
of Frank's. I took consideration when I was
Right.
doing that, plus trying to make it work for the budget that I came up with.
Because this
Pardon?
assumes a
Plus
4.22%
Oh, yes, yes. That was
Tax
the other thing that came into play.
revenue.
Oh, And AIM came in, is back reinstated for us. So because no number has been given to us at this point, I'm using the number that I had last 3 years, which was $9,300. So I added that into the revenues.
So that helped.
That helped on this side.
But I'm curious in that, so if you took had Frank's budget accounted for the AIM side of things?
No, he didn't know about it.
Okay, so if you took Frank's and added the AIM, you would have a surplus, right?
Well,
Because you.
I did not
'cause
take
Frank's is-
all of Frank's, because when I looked at Frank's numbers, like when I looked at your numbers, some of them just didn't make sense for the application. Based on history and what our needs were, I had modified the number that I felt would make sense from my experience
Okay.
with these accounts,
and is
so.
it, no, sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, I may be wrong, and it's up for judgment.
Are we gonna
I'm
have Frank's
just-
presentation?
I don't know. But I'm just going by what I feel is gonna be the
Sure.
best option in here. I could be wrong. I mean, it's you as a board call is what you want for the numbers. But at the end of this evening, I need to have a balanced budget. Revenues need to equal expenses. Whatever this budget is, at the end of tonight, is what will be published into the paper for Thursday, and what this board will speak to on April 23rd. You still have, that set aside, you still have time between now and
To modify it.
and April 30th to modify the budget. But again, on May 1st, this budget becomes a budget becomes final, and that is what we work with off for the next year, unless we need to find some sort of amendment with it. It's imperative because our tax roll runs, we need to get that money, those figures over to the assessor's office so that they can print the bills for us, so the bills can be printed for us. It's just like a domino effect, and I think that needs to be there by May 1st.
I've already started getting things from Monroe County, getting us ready to set up for tax billing. So I have literally like 2.5 weeks, because I like to see my tax bills roll in about mid-May, so we can make sure everything's good.
So my question is for you, Frank. So you presented something that was a balanced budget without any tax increase.
Which is what you've received, I think.
Yep. And currently we're at a 4.2% tax increase. So do you want to dig into some of the things that you had proposed and whether we should go with those numbers?
If you'd like to do that at a future time, let me just propose this.
Go ahead, I got this water.
At this point, everybody's had these reports to go through them. At this point, at 6:30 in the evening, we should have gone through the numbers to note those changes before we came to this meeting. Having said that, though, we all have lives. And so what I am proposing, that we pass Mary's budget with that 4% increase. And for my own satisfaction, I went through her budget and compared them with my numbers.
Uh-huh.
And her changes are justified.
Okay.
Her increase to me is justified, based on historical numbers, based on the state, based on our rate versus all the other villages. I think it's a good budget. And it's my view that if we pass this evening, and if you want to, in the very near future, because we have to do it soon, go through all of these numbers to see where my numbers differ from Mary's, I'd be happy to do that with you. But for tonight, I think we have to think about what's the right thing to do. And the right thing to do, in my eyes, is to pass the budget Mary proposed with the 4% increase.
I just have a question. I mean, philosophically, To have a 0% tax increase means we're rolling back revenues. And I don't see any evidence that our need for revenue is diminishing. I mean, everything else is going up at least the rate of inflation in the budget. So to deprive ourselves of revenue and make, create a hole in the future, I just don't see what sense that makes.
What are you proposing as far as the tax increase?
Well, I would defer to Mary because I think she's done a responsible job with the numbers. I know she's looked into every category. And I talked to Dorothea earlier about that. So I agree with Frank that that's probably the responsible thing to do from tonight. I'm open to more investigation if we can cut somewhere and do it responsibly. But I'm concerned that in the past, when village boards voted to go with less than the rate of inflation or the rate of inflation, you're actually rolling back revenue. And it just doesn't make sense when everything else is going up at least at the rate of inflation to deprive ourselves of revenue, because it's just creating a challenge for future budgets to get out of that hole. And the whole problem that we're in right now is because past village boards have deprived the village of a reasonable amount of revenue. And that's why we've struggled fiscally the last few years, in addition to the hit that we've taken from the litigation expenses. So, thinking long-term here, to me, a 0% tax increase doesn't seem responsible.
Yes, and you've always talked about it being a jagged thing though.
Mhm.
And over time, it's a trend that is pretty fluid, but it's a jagged thing. So
Sure.
if it is going to be a jagged thing, it's gotta come down sometimes.
Yes, I would agree with that, but we also have to look at our needs. I mean, it's not like we have, we're eating caviar at our meetings and we have, an excessive contingency in the budget. We have virtually no contingency in the budget. And so it's a bare bones budget even at this level. And I've been doing this a long time, and I can't remember the last time we had a surplus in our budget. It's been a long, long
It's been
time.
at least 10 years.
At least 10 years.
Been at
And
least-
yet, we should have a surplus because we have equipment reserves that we haven't funded, as we said we're gonna fund. If we wanna continue to do meaningful capital projects like the traffic calming on South Street, we've gotta have money available to make those discretionary projects. And if we just keep going back to the Steve Maddox strategy of cutting the budget for the sake of cutting the budget without understanding the amount of revenue we need, we're really cutting our mission short.
Would you say, Bob, that a 4.5 would be within reason?
I-
That would mean, how much per household increase, Mary? On average, let's say a $275,000 home would then see an increase of what, about $100 a year in their tax?
Well, I've got the 4% already figured out here for you. So right now, just to take the example that we used last week, it would be an $86 increase on a $254,000 house.
Now, given the interest that people have demonstrated in the active transportation and the pedestrian safety plan, do you think that they would be willing to invest in an extra $100 a year in their taxes if we were able to then realize the pedestrian safety plan?
I think most people would. I think we have to look at, did we see any categories in this review that were going down by 2%? Does that seem to be a wide, if that was a wide strategy, then I could say yes. This appears to be the last year that we're going to have high litigation expenses, because it appears, at least from the current vantage point, that the 75 Monroe saga is about to end. Next year, if we don't have those expenses, then there would be a good argument for reducing our budget. But to do it this year, when those expenses aren't decreasing, and I don't see any significant decreases in any particular category, I don't see the justification to reduce our revenue stream by 2%. It doesn't make sense.
Plus, the other thing too is our taxes are the only surefire thing that we are gonna receive. All the other revenues that are coming in, that I have listed for you, they're wild cards. That they're application driven, parking tickets are, you know, if they decide to pay, you know, that kind of thing. We don't know about those revenues. Even Monroe County sales tax could come in lower than what they've projected for me. So, I mean, it's a real crapshoot when you're coming down to doing this budget. And there's so much justification for it. I mean, we've never had debt before. And in the last couple of years here, we've got a bond that we're repaying, we've got the lease that we're repaying, we're looking at another bond, and we've got all kinds of projects here that we can't fund out of our own funds right now, because they're just, money is just not there. And like I said right in the beginning, these categories should be all fattened up so that every month when I'm closing out the books, I don't need to come to the Board of Trustees to say, I need to move monies from category A to category C because there just isn't enough money in there. It should be wealthy enough in that line to be able to sustain us from the beginning of the year to the very end. And we should end up with a surplus, and we should be instating all our reserves. We haven't done that because we've depleted all that. We're at bare bones bottom right now.
And it
And
really
it's
comes
just-
down to an analysis of our revenue stream, because in past years, we haven't had a revenue stream adequate to fund the core mission of the village. And that's why several years ago, we made the decision to gradually increase the tax revenue, because, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago, I did the 30-year study, and we found out that in real dollars, our tax rate was 25% lower than it was in 1984. No other village has sustained that kind of loss in revenue, and so we needed to make that up. But, I don't see where we're at the point right now where we're at a comfort level where we should start decreasing the amount of revenue that we receive.
All right, so my question though is, I am comfortable at the 4% of what,
4.2, I think, is what she had
4.22.
proposed.
well, it's a 4.22% raise from 379 to 395.
Yeah,
Ends
we
up
want-
being
We
4.22%.
just want to round
Three
it.
digits.
Yeah.
We don't want 6 digits out,
Right,
it's just
okay,
crazy.
so, but I'm not in favor of going higher than that to only fund a contingency fund. Because we've done the work to get it balanced to what we're comfortable with. I'm not in favor of going any higher than that.
Well, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And-
Well, I don't think anyone's suggesting that.
But
Yeah.
no, it was just suggested earlier that we went up to 4.2,
4.2.
and I'm much more comfortable keeping it at the balance that we have budgeted to, which is 395.
And I'm very comfortable with that, and I think the consensus is probably that this is a good start, this is a
Yeah.
good budget, and a budget that we can vote on, and if you wanna go over where we made all these changes, we could do that, but,
I was most interested in what you thought about the changes Mary had made to yours, and you blessed them.
yes,
But I'll do the work too.
we could do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
this is a good exercise. I
Right.
appreciate
It's a
it,
very good
honestly, because especially this year, this is an enormous help for me, but,
Do we need to determine the tax rate this evening?
the tax rate would be $3.95 per thousand, which would be a 4% increase in our tax
I
revenue.
understand that. Bob,
Okay,
do you want to speak to that?
I'll make a motion to authorize the proposed budget by Mary as our tentative budget for 2019-2020, with a tax rate of $3.95 per thousand. Do I have a second?
I'll second
All in favor?
that.
I-
Aye.
Aye.
Real quick while I have everybody here.
Thank you very
Is
much.
anyone opposed? Does anyone abstain?
Given that I just got sworn in about 10 minutes ago, I would like to abstain. I know you all have done the work, I don't want to, it's not going to tip the
No,
scales.
that
here.
makes
It just
sense.
doesn't
Renee,
feel
that's fine.
appropriate to,
That's appropriate.
We can sit down and discuss this budget.
okay, great. I
Just
haven't
to
had
kinda
any
bring
training
you up
yet, I
to
don't want to jump in, so.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I don't mind bringing you up to
Okay.
speed.
All right.
Real quick, if I can
Yeah.
jump in, Mary had reviewed with the board the tax cap while I was out, and everybody agreed to
Override.
override it. There's a legal thing that has to be done. We need to have a
That's
public
a
hearing
local
on
law.
it. And
Right.
it's a local law, so I need a motion to go to public hearing on that on the 23rd prior to your tentative budget.
So moved. We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it immensely.
Thank you, and
Thank
thank you,
you.
Mary,
Thank
for
you,
all
Mary.
that good work.
Thank you,
Really
Dan, for your
appreciate
work.
Do you wanna, recess for a few minutes before we have our attorney-client session at 7?
Sure.
Sure.
And I need to talk to Steve.
So, I'll make a motion to recess.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is the board gonna need me for the rest of the night, or are you